Module 3.2, Etiology. In this module, we're going to define etiology. We'll look at determinants of health, define what that is, and look at some examples. I'll define relative risk. We'll look at dose-response relationships, and then end with some important terms and a take-home message. So etiology is defined as the cause or set of causes of the disease or condition. However, I want you to also look at etiology not just as the cause, but of the factors related to a disease or a condition. So again, why do those people with the health problem have it? So identify what are some of the factors associated with their condition or their health problem. So this phase takes an in-depth look at the factors and determinant of the health problem, and we sometimes call these the determinants of health, and I underline that because it's important that you know what that term means. In the next phase, you'll learn about behavioral diagnosis and environmental diagnosis that's related to the health condition. So here are some of the examples of the determinants of health. These are factors associated with the health condition. It could be good health condition, right? But usually when we're doing classes, things in our class, we're looking at poor health outcomes. So some of these examples, and this list is not extensive, could be genetics, it could be individual behavior, social structure, family and friends, for example, mental issues or mental conditions, economics, environment, culture, and the policies and regulations that surround that individual. Can you think of any other determinants of health that I haven't listed here? Now, also looking at this list, are there any determinants of health that can be changed? We call those modifiable determinants. What about factors that cannot be changed, non-modifiable determinants? Which one of these listed here are things that you cannot change? Would genetics be one of them? Right. So, of all of these determinants of health, there are certain ones that you can change and certain things that you cannot change. In public health programs, we usually try to work with determinants of health that we can change, that can be modified. Another term I want you to look at is relative risk. So in Module 3.1, I introduced you to a lot of epidemiological terms, and I said that you'll learn more about that when you take epidemiology, if you haven't already done so. Another term, however, I want to tell you about is this term here, relative risk, RR. Relative risk compares the risk of developing the health issue between people who are exposed to a certain factor to those who are not exposed. So again, it's defined as incidents or new cases of the problem in those exposed developed by incident of the problem in those not exposed. So that's relative risk. Another term is dose-response relationship. Obviously, this is the relationship between the dosage and the response. And you can kind of do it 4 different ways. So that is, if you increase the dose, you'll increase the response. If you increase the dose, you will decrease the response. If you decrease the dose, you might increase the response. And if you decrease the dose, you might decrease the response. Right? So 4 different combinations of dose-response relationships. So for example, let's look at the first one. When you increase the dose, you will increase the response. When I drink more coffee, I will have a response to the caffeine. So there's going to be an increased response to the caffeine in my coffee. Energetic, jitteriness, however that might be. Another one might be when you increase the dose, you decrease the response. Can you think of something like that? When you increase the dose of something, you will decrease the response. What about when you decrease the dose, you'll increase the response? A lot of different things could be kind of configured in this relationship. What about the last one? Decreased dose equals to decreased response. So can you think of examples for each of these types of relationships, whether it's in health, whether it's in program education, whether it's in your everyday life? Can you think of some? Other important terms that you should know are things like odds ratios, population attributable risk, cost benefit analysis, ecological correlations, and protective factors. And again, these terms you'll learn more deeply in epidemiology, but these are some of the basic terms that you should know as well for this class. And protective factors, you think about it, you identify the causes associated with the disease, but what could be some of the protective factors that is related to the health issue as well? Right? It could be social support. It could be living in an environment that fosters exercise and healthy eating, for example. So these are protective factors. And last but not least, the take-home message for this module. Realize that you need to take a look at a variety of different epidemiological data from a variety of different sources. And based on that, you need to make conclusions about the potential cause or causes of the disease. Etiology, right? You need to identify the factors associated with the poor health outcomes. Generally, there are two ways of doing this, and you might have thought about this way as well. The first way is the laboratory or clinical setting, which is hard to do and oftentimes unethical to do so. I can do a case control study in which I subject one group of individuals to a certain virus or to a certain condition or a certain way of life, knowing that it might be related to a poor health outcome, to make that comparable to those who don't have any. I can't do that. So the best way for me to do so is just to look at an epidemiological setting, what happens naturally. This is usually the best approach. I could only look at groups of people who are on their own choice already exposed to a certain condition, such as taking drugs or smoking cigarettes, follow them and see if they develop the disease. Right? And this is what we tend to do in epidemiological settings. So hence, when you look at this particular module of etiology, identifying the cause, realize that in public health, we tend to identify the cause by looking at epidemiological data and looking at trends. That is, if individuals who are exposed have this relative risk or this odds ratio, it is likely that this disease is related to this exposure. Right? So this is the way we do it in public health, and we do it in a natural setting.